Grade 6 and welcome to Thursday's reading lesson. Now, we are going to be carrying on reading the next chapter of Wonder, which is called Paging Mr. Tushman. Now, the thing that we are focusing on in this is collecting information to back up our point, almost like as part of a debate. So at the end, after I've finished reading it, I'm going to show you a question that you need to be able to answer, okay? And you need to be able to say whether you agree or disagree with it. It's not really a question, it's a statement. So a statement that you either agree or disagree with, and then you're going to give reasons why you agree or disagree with it. Okay, to do that though, let's get into the text, and my face will appear on the screen in a minute. Okay, so as I said, we are looking at debating a topic from a book. Now there's a couple of questions here for you to be thinking about as we're reading. The first one we'll discuss together. The second one I want you to have a go at doing in your book. So you can either pause it when you hear something or come back to it a bit later. As always, I'll put some of the text down here below, but I can't put all of it. Okay, paging Mr. Tushman. So just in case you missed it, just before that, Oggy has been arguing with his mum and dad about whether he needs to go to school, and at first he really didn't want to, but then kind of mum and dad managed to talk him around, so he's quite liking the idea of it. And they said about going visiting and meeting the head teacher. And here we go. Paging Mr. Tushman. I would have been more nervous about meeting Mr. Tushman if I'd known I was going to be meeting some kids from the new school. But I didn't know, so if anything, I was kind of giggly. I couldn't stop thinking about all the jokes Daddy had made about Mr. Tushman's name. So when me and Mum arrived at Beecher Prep a few weeks before the start of school, and I saw Mr. Tushman standing there, waiting for us at the entrance, I started giggling right away. He didn't look at all like what I pictured, though. I guess I thought he would have had a huge bum, but he didn't. In fact, he was a pretty normal guy, tall and thin, old, but not really old. He seemed nice. He shook my mum's hand and she said, "Hi, Mr. Tushman. It's so nice to see you again. This is my son, August." Mr. Tushman looked right at me and smiled and nodded. He put his hand out for me to shake. "Hi, August," he said, totally normally. "It's a pleasure to meet you." "Hi," I mumbled, dropping my hand into his hand while I looked down at his feet. He was wearing red Adidas. "So," he said, kneeling down in front of me, so I couldn't look at his sneakers but I had to look at his face. "Your mum and dad have told me a lot about you." "Like, what have they told you?" I asked. "Sorry?" "Honey, you have to speak up," said Mum. "Like what?" I asked, trying not to mumble. I admit, I had a bad habit of mumbling. "Well, that you like to read," said Mr. Tushman, "and that you're a great artist." He had blue eyes with white eyelashes. "And you're into science, right?" "Uh-huh," I nodded. "We have a couple of great science subjects at Beecher," he said. "Maybe you'll take one of them." "Uh-huh," I said, though I had no idea what he meant when he said this. "So are you ready to take a tour?" "You mean we're doing that now?" I said. "Do you think we were going to the movies?" he answered, smiling as he stood up. You didn't tell me we were taking a tour," I said to my mum in my accusing voice. "Oggy," she started to say. "It'll be fine, August," said Mr. Tushman, holding his hand out to me. "I promise." I think he wanted me to take his hand, but I took Mum's instead. He smiled and started walking towards the entrance. Mummy gave my hand a little squeeze, though I don't know if it was a "I love you" squeeze or if it was a "I'm sorry" squeeze. Probably a little bit of both. The only school I'd ever been inside before was Via's. When I went with Mum and Dad to watch Via sing in spring concerts and stuff like that. This school though was very different. It was smaller and it smelled like a hospital. Okay, so looking at the questions, when it goes back here, when it says in the text, and I'll put this text bit here, it says that Mr. Tushman said totally normally, "It's a pleasure to meet you." So what does that tell us about how people normally talk to Oggy? Now, if we were in class, we'd have a little chat about this, but obviously we're not in class. But I think this means that actually most of the time people don't talk totally normally to him. So he was quite surprised that Mr. Tushman was just so normal. Now, what I want you to do is very quickly have a little think back about what events, what things has happened in this chapter to show that Oggy is feeling nervous, and I want you to make a list of it. Okay, so if you want to pause now and do that, you can do. If you want to move back a little bit and listen to the text, you can do. So do what you need to do. Now, here is the statement that I want you to look at. Mum and Dad were wrong not to tell Oggy about the school tour. So he didn't know that he was going to go for a tour around the school. So do you think that that was the right thing for Mum to do and Dad, or the wrong thing to do, Mum and Dad? So what I want you to do is write down a few ideas in your book about whether you agree or disagree, okay? What we would do if we were in school, we'd have a bit of a debate about it. Obviously that's impossible. But I want you to write down, I don't know, 4 or 5 points that you could have made in a debate about whether you think Mum and Dad were wrong not to tell Oggy about the school tour, because they chose not to tell him, even though they probably knew it was going to happen. So your task for today is you should have already answered the question about the clues that show that Oggy was nervous, and then now write 4 or 5 things about whether you agree or disagree with this statement down here about whether they were right or wrong to tell Oggy about the school tour. And other than that, Year 6, I'm looking forward to seeing the work that you've done, and I will see you in the next session. Goodbye.